Are you ready to migrate your Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces? You may have already heard about this, but Visual Studio Codespaces will soon be retired in favor of GitHub Codespaces. And this means that we will have to migrate to the latter in order to be able to continue to use this awesome online development environment. Today, we're going to see the 3 ways we have to migrate to GitHub Codespaces. Hi everybody and welcome back to CoderDave. If you've been using Visual Studio Codespaces in the past, you probably have received already this email. Soon you won't be able to create new Visual Studio Codespaces environments, and in February 2021 we will not be able to access the service anymore, and any Codespaces or plans that you have created through it will be deleted. So why is this? Currently customers have 2 options for using cloud-hosted development environments: Visual Studio Codespaces and GitHub Codespaces. To simplify and streamline the user experience, GitHub and Microsoft are consolidating those into GitHub Codespaces, and they will retire Visual Studio Codespaces starting on 17th of February 2021. Today, I want to walk you through 3 ways we have to migrate from Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces, and I will also give you a timeline and talk about a few more extra information about the whole move. But before we start, make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and if you want to learn about DevOps, especially with Azure DevOps and GitHub. Just click on the subscribe button below right now and turn on the notifications so you will not miss any new videos. Alright, let's talk about the timeline first. GitHub Codespaces are already available, as you may know, in beta since September 4, so maybe you already have it enabled, or if not, you can ask for entering the beta. Starting on November 20, 2020, we will not be able to create new plans and new environments, and new user won't be able to sign up for the service. At this stage, however, existing Codespaces environments will still be working. Finally, on September 17th, 2021, the service will be retired. This means that you will not be able to access the portal anymore, and the existing environments will be deleted. Even though we still have few months to migrate from Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces, I would recommend you to do the migration as soon as possible, for 2 reasons. The first one is that GitHub Codespaces is currently free while it's in beta, while you're actually paying for Visual Studio Codespaces. And we all know that free goods are good, right? The second reason instead is that if you migrate now, you will have more time to familiarize with the new service and the new environments, because even though Visual Studio Codespaces and GitHub Codespaces are pretty similar, they have their own differences. Alright, so how can we migrate from Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces? Well, let's start by saying that there's no direct way to move from Visual Studio Codespaces everything into GitHub Codespaces, and you will eventually have to recreate your environments in GitHub when you have access to the beta. However, we have 3 ways to do that, and we will go through each one of those right now. The first way is obviously to recreate everything from scratch. This is the simplest option, but of course the one that requires more work. You can create your own GitHub repo, you manually push all the code there, and then you create the Codespaces environment. You can of course copy over or recreate all the customization you have, like the .files, container settings, .json, etc., even though this will be quite time consuming. By the way, take a look at my video about all the ways for customizing the Codespaces environment if you haven't watched it yet. You have the link up here and in the video description. The second way we have to move our Visual Studio Codespaces environment into GitHub is by exporting and downloading the actual environment. To do this, you need to have VS Code and the Codespaces extension. After you log in the extension, you can see all your Codespaces, and you can right-click on the Codespace environment you want to export, and then click on Export Codespace. Remember that the Codespace environment needs to be in a suspended state. If not, VS Code will prompt for suspending it. When the environment has been exported, you can download it, and in fact VS Code asks for a folder. You can specify any folder you want on your computer, and here is where VS Code downloads your Codespace. If we check that folder, we can see that we have this VS Online mount, and inside we have the full workspace of your Codespaces environment, and this includes the .dev container folder, the personalization and customization we made to the configuration of the Codespace at creation time, but also it includes this .vs code folder that contains all the customization we've made to the environment after the creation. In fact, if we compare the source repo from which I've created the codespaces initially, that is here on the left, with the content of the exported codespaces workspace, we can see that the latter contains files and especially settings and customization that are not present in the remote repo. Once again, we have this VS Code customization folder, which is not present here, together with some other files and folder that have been created into the Codespace environment and never committed back to the repo. At this point, all I have to do is create again a new repo, upload or push these files, and then my GitHub Codespaces environment will be complete with all the settings and customization I had in the Visual Studio Codespaces. This was much better than the first way, isn't it? Before we move to the third and last way to migrate from Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces, hit the like button below if you're enjoying this video. It will help the channel growing and will mean the world to me. Right into the third way. This is pretty similar to the previous one we've seen, but we don't need to export and download anything and re-upload it to GitHub because Git can do this for us. First, you need to have an empty GitHub repo. It should be not initialized for this to work, like in my example over here. Then let's jump into the Codespace environment. If I go to the terminal and I do ll, I can see that I have all the files. Let me make this bigger. Also over here, including the VS Code folder like we had before. So what I can do, even though this workspace is already connected to the original repo where I do not have, for example, this .vs code and the other personalization I made, is adding a new origin. To do so, I can do it directly with the git command. And I'm adding with the name gh-origin the path of the new repo I've just created. Remember that must be non-initialized. Let's do it. And then let's just push the code to the new gh-origin. And that's it. Let's go back to GitHub, refresh. And as you can see, now we have all the files in here, including the dev container and the VS Code personalization. And so we can spin up a new Codespaces environment from here. If we do so, we should see all the personalization we made. And in fact, you can see over here, the Codespace is built using the dev container information I provide. It's now installing the MySQL client as per my post container instruction. And now that the Codespaces environment is starting, in a moment we will see all the personalization applied. And in fact, here we go. We have the blue bar, we have the pink over here, and all the other personalization I made, including all the installed extensions like Peacock, Markdown Lint, Waka Time, and etc. So as you can see, without downloading and without recreating anything, we were able to basically migrate from Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces using just what Git provides. Now that we have seen the three ways we have to migrate from Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces, let's try to address the most common questions about this topic. First off, are Visual Studio Codespaces and GitHub Codespaces at feature parity? Well, the answer is not yet. Although the two services are very similar, they have their own differences. And the biggest one for me, at least at the time of recording this video, is that in GitHub Codespaces you cannot choose the size of your environment. I know that this will be addressed soon, but it's just not there yet. And I also think that we will see more and more features coming to GitHub Codespaces until a point in which we will have more features in GitHub than the one we have in Visual Studio Codespaces. Another question I've seen often asked is, what about the private preview of Codespaces for Visual Studio? Well, the private preview of Codespaces on Windows for Visual Studio 2019 that is currently available in Visual Studio Codespaces will be moved to GitHub Codespaces as well. Users that are already into the preview will receive an invite to continue their preview experience in GitHub Codespaces as soon as the new preview is available in the next few weeks, while new users that will be accepted into the preview will be onboarded directly into GitHub Codespaces. Final question, does GitHub Codespaces support only GitHub hosted projects, or can I use any other Git provider? Well, the answer is not yet. GitHub Codespaces obviously provides a streamlined experience for creation of environments within GitHub hosted projects. However, the team is working on optimizing this experience also for other Git providers like Azure Repos or Bitbucket. It's just not there yet. So if you need that, stay tuned because it will come soon. All right, that's it for today. Will you be migrating your Visual Studio Codespaces to GitHub Codespaces anytime soon? Also, let me know in the comment section below if you can think of any other way to migrate to GitHub that I haven't considered. Thanks so much for watching, I really hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I see you in the next video here at CoderDave.